This is another episode of Standup Comedy, your host and MC, celebrating 40-plus years on the fringe of show business. Stories, interviews, and comedy sets from the famous and not so famous. Here's your host and MC, Scott Edwards.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another great show. We have something extra special. It's kind of funny I say that every show, but this guy and I go way, way back. I owned a chain of comedy clubs in the 80s. In my original room, I wanted to make it fun from the get-go, and people had to wait in line or needed something to keep their attention before the show started. And I ran into this great guy who ended up being really the kind of mascot for my comedy club, Laughs Unlimited. I've been waiting years to talk to him. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome with a huge round of applause, Clancy the Clown, and of course these days, his real name, Jim Jays. Jim, it's so great to catch up. It's been such a long time, but I got to tell you, those years when you were working as Clancy the Clown at my clubs were so memorable, and your image is just tied to the success of my club. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Well, you're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
So Clancy the Clown, I was trying to kind of give everybody an image, and you were a silent entertainment clown, like what people think. You did balloons and you had some funny stuff, but you were also a magician, and that allowed you to interact with an audience without talking. You entertained the crowds while they were in line waiting to get in. Yes, I was very lucky to have lines waiting to get in my business. But more importantly, I had you do about 8-10 minute warm up before the comedy show. And you did that like every night. I mean, it was incredible as Clancy the Clown. Jim, how did you get into clowning or comedy?
Well, it's kind of funny. I was an actual circus clown. I toured with Circus Vargas on the West Coast, and I toured with Shrine Circuses in the Midwest. And when I figured out I didn't want to spend my whole life being on the road, I'm originally from Sacramento. I moved back there. But it's like, where can a clown work? And so circus clown isn't like a birthday party clown, really, even though I could do that stuff. But circus work is different. And when Laughs got going, I kept thinking, nobody does that. Why wouldn't I do that? I should try that. So, yeah, I liked it because I'd be able to work with people, and it was fun. And I got to meet a lot of great comedians, and that was even more fun. And some great magicians who all were very, very nice to me, and that was fun. So yeah, it was an interesting
before we
combination.
Talk about the Laughs years, I did not remember, and I'm getting older, so I apologize, that you had such a history as a professional clown with circuses. I mean, everybody's heard of Circus Vargas, and
right.
I mean, you did that for how many years?
Just a couple, but I just decided that I didn't want to spend my whole life living in a trailer, basically camping in the city.
Right. I'm sure everybody realizes the whole idea of a circus job is that you go from town to town to town, and you put off, sometimes 6-8 shows in a week. And as that kind of circus clown, were you doing the same kind of thing where you were doing, balloons and magic? Were you always a silent clown?
Well, I was a silent clown mostly because in the circus, they couldn't hear you anyway. I mean, you're working these big auditoriums and these big places. And so I just learned to do it silently. And I mean, I would talk if I had to. If people came up and talked to me, I'd talk to them. But they couldn't hear you anyway in the big arenas. So you learn to do a lot of physical stuff. I didn't quite do the same stuff as it Laughs, but I did juggling and stuff like that. And I did a lot of different kinds of things with other performers. If they had other clowns, they would work with me, but I was usually like on the Shrine shows, I was the head, what they call the boss clown. I was in charge of the other clowns. and I would build all the equipment and do that stuff. But it was different.
Wow. Well, that's interesting on two levels. One, you're not like Teller from Penn and Teller. You didn't refuse to talk. It just that you were trained in the circuses to get your message and your comedy across visually because people couldn't hear you, and you just kept that going in the laughs days. And then two, I totally forgot that besides a magician and a clown, you were a terrific juggler. You kind of did it all. That is fascinating, and I think people would relate to the fact that it would be exciting for a little bit to maybe be on the road and be a circus clown, something kids dream about when they're young. But the reality of living in a trailer and traveling town to town to town, it's difficult, especially when you're starting a family, which I know you have.
Well, I didn't have one while I was on the road, and because that's a part of it too, is having a family. I didn't have a family till I got off the road. But it's the old joke is when I was a kid, I wanted to run away and join the circus, and now I'm with the circus. I want to run away and join at home. So it was, yeah.
Well, that makes perfect sense. Well, that's fascinating. And then how did you get the job with me? I don't quite remember. I mean, you were always around, but I don't remember ever saying, hey, you're hired. Did you come in and showcase, or did you just come in and say, hey, this is what I do? I don't recall. Do you remember?
I remember. It was kind of a funny story, but I had called a lot just because I wanted to try it. And it was an oddball idea. I know it was different. And I kept calling you and calling you and calling you. And finally I said to my wife, I said, that's it. I'm just going to go down there and do it. So I showed up in wardrobe when you were still at the Delta Queen. Yeah.
Right. The first location.
I showed up and there was this huge line of people. I just kept working the line. And finally you looked like, what the hell is this? And you came out there and I go, well, I'm the guy that's been calling you for 3 weeks. Oh, okay. It was like, that's kind of what we did, because I knew it was a different idea, but I knew that he had these huge lines. And part of the thing that I ended up doing most of the time was people would wait in the wrong line for half an hour. Then they'd get up there and find they didn't have a ticket. And so I would always work the line and saying, oh, if you have reservations, you don't need to be here. You can just go ahead. Because people got tired of, they get upset if they get there and they go, oh, well, you're not on the list or something. So that was part of the service part of it, where I would find out, people were on the line and what.
Well, I realized right away what an asset it was to have you. I mean, we were both kids. I was 24 when I started my club. So I was learning as I was going, and having that kind of support and entertainment, I felt added one extra level to the experience for the audience. And the fact that you were able actually to direct people and help people know where to go was a bonus, because for me, and again, I was focused on surviving financially and providing the best comedy show. So I never really worried about what Clancy the Clown was doing, because you were a pro, you did what you were doing, and I always really appreciated it. To kind of, it's difficult in a podcast, but you are a true clown. You have the full getup, face makeup. You really look the part. As I mentioned, you were doing magic and some kind of balloon stuff and some gags, juggling. And it was really a distraction for people that, like you said, are waiting in a line. And then I was, quick to always take advantage of good talent. And a lot of comedy clubs, there's this blank brick wall people are staring at for half an hour before the show starts. And you got some music going, but what you and I did is we put you into the show. You were the warm up of the whole evening. And as you said, whether it was Jerry Seinfeld, Gary Shandling, or even a famous magician like Harry Anderson, you still had Jim Jays as Clancy the Clown up there kind of entertaining people. And there are some people that have an aversion to clowns, but it's free entertainment. You weren't trying to talk or sell them something. You were just
Right.
killing time. I always thought it was amazing. Was it
Well,
fun for you having a set stage?
It was, and it was funny. A couple things I remembered the most was one thing I would tell the comedians that came in. First, they're looking like, "Oh, it's a clown. What the heck's going on here?" And I said, and I'd always be nice to them and introduce myself. And I said, "Well, you may not want to make fun of me, just because the audience really likes me. I'm here every week, and just trust me." And they always took heed to that, because sometimes, "Oh, make fun of the clown." I go, "You can if you want to, but remember, they like me here. I'm familiar." And my favorite line was from Bobby Slayton. He'd say, they always say Clancy the Clown. Like, you can't figure out what he is. He's got this wild hair. He's got these clown shoes on, his costume and makeup. And, what do you think he is? Clancy the brain surgeon? Come on.
Well, Slayton always had a twisted way to see things, but you were absolutely correct. And I wasn't exaggerating when I said in those early years, you were like the club mascot.
Right.
We used you for some commercials, TV shows. You made appearances at special events. It was
Jazz Festival.
Oh man. Yeah, those were crazy days, huh?
Well, it's funny that almost all of my memories of the club were good. The only time there was one time we had like a bit that still was really kind of traumatic to me at the time. Was funny was that, I could work through anything. I had enough heckler stoppers, visual heckler stoppers, that I didn't have a problem with hecklers and stuff. But one night it was out in the line, and here comes this motorhome. And it parks right outside. And all these people come out of this motorhome, and they're drunk, really drunk. And I ran into you and said, "Just so you know, a motorhome full of drunks just showed up." And you're like, "Okay." I said, No, I'm not kidding. They're really drunk." And you put them near the back, which probably wasn't the smartest thing in the long run, just because they started yelling at the stage. So I'm the opening act. I'm doing it. And Mac and Jamie were performing there that night. And they just kept at it, yelling and insulting. And the audience, I had the audience on my side. They were almost booing these people. And I got through the act, and I'm thinking, why don't they throw these people out? What in the hell is going on? And I walked off stage, and I started crying. Just spontaneously crying. I don't know why. It was just so much stress or whatever. And the comedians were like, "Well, we're not going to go out there unless they get those people quiet." And then I got mad. And so I run up the back door, go up to where you were up at the front end of the house. And as I get to the front of the house, there are the cops all standing and waiting. They're waiting to take them out. But I'm like, what in the Sam? Oh, please. Great.
Well, I'm so glad you recounted that story. And I have to tell you, I've been a guest on several podcasts and have told that story at least a couple times on my podcast, because it was a very traumatic and stressful evening for everybody. But the end of the story was we marched that group out. There were cops lined up 2 by 2 about every 6 feet.
I remember.
Because I never called the cops if they're, about a problem. So when I called and said there was a problem, the cops took it serious. There was like 12 of them or 14 of them, and they lined up.
Yeah.
And we escorted those guys out. And then I don't know if you ever heard the end of the story, Jim. They got into their motorhome. They drove about half a mile away, and they got pulled over and got busted for drunk driving. It was perfect. It was great revenge. The father that had brought his son for a bachelor party or for a football thing, I don't know what it was. But they couldn't bust all the drunk people in the back of the motorhome, but they let them leave. And then they busted the driver for drunk driving. It was A night I'm sure they haven't forgotten. It was a
That
night.
was an unforgettable night.
Yeah, I hadn't forgotten, but I hadn't heard your version of it. So thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that. Hopefully you've
Well, and I
had
don't-
some good memories too. What were some of the highlights? You got to work with some amazing magicians.
Yeah, I got to work with Martin Lewis, who just passed away recently.
Yeah, no,
And he was always very kind.
yeah, he was a great
And
guy.
He was very kind, and most of the magicians, almost all of them, were really kind. And at first, they're going, "It's a clown," and then I would show them a couple of moves and stuff, and then they knew I was really a magician too. That I really knew this stuff. It wasn't just because clowns have a kind of a bad reputation, especially around magicians. It's like, "Oh, is it clown, huh?"
Yeah,
And
but you
and
did
then they said,
you did real magic. Did you do straight magic ever?
"Yeah, I mean, I do now. I haven't clowned in 25 years, and I stopped clowning and started doing more just straight magic. And I also do marionettes, or just carved puppets and on strings. And I did puppetry too for years, and I did more and more now, off and on. But yeah, I did straight magic, and I did mostly for kids though, which I really liked. I mean, I've done everything. I've done all that stuff, but I like entertaining kids. And I used to perform at a lot of libraries and stuff like that. And I just there's nothing like kids laughing. And I just love that part. I like the adult stuff. I did some corporation stuff for different corporate things, but working for kids is more fun for me.
Yeah,
And
I think it's interesting that you dropped the clowning, but you kept the magic going. When you do your magic shows, is it straight magic? Is there some comedy magic? Is it?
It's a lot of comedy, and I try to be good as far as doing stuff that's really good magic, but also try to be funny. And with kids, it's just fun to do it. It's fun to get paid to make kids laugh so they wet their pants. It's okay.
That's good to have
fun.
a goal. Well,
that's right.
Yeah, well, that's great, and I'm so glad that you're still performing, because you were a terrific performer, and as I've said several times, very important to Laughs Unlimited in those early days. And you mentioned the marionette and the puppets. I want to tell you, in fact, it's right over my shoulder, one of my greatest gifts ever received was a carved clown head. I'm not sure what they call those, where it's basically a carved head on a stick. I know that they've been used a lot in theater, but you did one for me, and it's always been a cherished gift. So thank you for that.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. But like I said, most of the experiences at the club were really good, and I had a lot of fun with one of I shouldn't say funniest, but another memorable one was a time that during the day I was doing some clowning somewhere, and I didn't know this, but I got bit by a spider, and I didn't know that. It was like a brown recluse spider.
Oh, wow.
And
those are nasty.
Well, it was. And so I was in makeup all day, and I called a doctor, see if I could go there and check it out. And they were like, "Nah, it's no big deal," or whatever. And I had to work at Laughs that night. So I'm working the club, and it's hot, cold outside and hot inside. So I'm going in and out, and I was running a fever, but I didn't know it because it was cold outside and hot inside and back and forth. And I'm working the show. I'm doing the opening. And I'm doing the trick with the big metal rings. And I throw one up in the air, and I catch it, and it was like somebody hit my hand with a hammer. And I'm like, what in the heck is that? And I finished the act, but my arm just hurt really bad. And I'm like, what is going on here? And I got off stage, finished the act, and there was a comedian named Angel Salazar who used to work the clubs.
Oh, yeah.
And Angel, one of his bits was he had a switchblade knife. And it'd say, I'm not so funny, but I got a knife. and I go to take off my gloves, because I worked with gloves, and it wouldn't come off my hand. And I couldn't figure out why it wouldn't come off my hand. And I said, "Angel, can you cut this off my hand?" "Sure." So he cuts this glove off my hand, and I go to pull up my sleeve so we can cut the glove off, and there's this red line running up my arm. And I'm like, "Oh, shoot, what is this?" My arm hurts. There's this red line running up my arm. I call my doctor. They're like, you've got blood poisoning. You've got, like a spider bite poison. And I'm like, how far up your arm does it go? And I'm like, I looked and looked, and it was up to my shoulder. And I said, well, you have to get to the hospital.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay. So have somebody tell you I'm leaving. I got to go. And you're like, okay. And I got to go. And, we're downtown Old Sacramento. You really can't leave your car there. So all I'm thinking about is I got to get to the hospital. I'm in full wardrobe, full makeup, full wardrobe, everything. So I get to the Mercy Hospital. And they're like,
in Clancy the Clown full outfit.
Yes, the full wardrobe, yes. And they're like, oh, what are you doing here? And I pull up my sleeve and I go, this. And they see that red line running on my arm. And they're like, oh, crap. And the funny part of it, if there was a funny part, was most clowns take off their makeup with baby oil. Well, for some reason, they didn't have any baby oil at the hospital. They couldn't find any baby oil in the hospital.
How
so
weird.
I'm laying in the hospital bed
in clown makeup. I hope no kids saw you.
No kids saw me, but
wow, that's a great, interesting story.
I ended up being in the hospital for a week. I could have lost my arm.
No.
But here you are sitting in makeup, and then at one point I kind of fell asleep and I woke up and I looked in the hallway and there was this figure in the doorway and it looked like an angel. And I'm like, did I die? And this woman's all in white and she's talking to me and she looks really familiar, but I'm thinking, oh, I died. And it was a girl I went to school with who became a nurse. And I'm like, oh, that's why I died.
Wow. I don't remember that story. I'm sure I heard it back in the day, but that you were that close with blood poisoning to spend a week in the hospital. That's a scary thing. And one of the weird things about being in full makeup and a full costume, you can have an injury and not be aware of it right away. And those brown recluse spiders are scary stuff. By the way, Angel Salazar, a very funny comic, was also an actor and appeared in the movie Scarface with Al Pacino and was a regular at a club back in those days. And it was very nice of him to help you with his switchblade. He on his stage, the switchblade was for comedy, backstage apparently for medical. But that's another fascinating story about your time at Laughs Unlimited. Well, you had a lot of great experiences. We really appreciated what you brought to the club as far as consistency. That's something else that people take for granted. At a comedy club, you have a different show every week, but the MC, me, and you as Clancy the Clown were consistent and always there, and people could count on that. And I think that adds a comfort level to an audience. So for everything you did, thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. You're welcome. It was fun. And you had the magic hat upstairs, the bar, and you had magicians working that too. And that was always fun.
Yeah, you got a chance to hang with a lot of magicians.
Yeah, and they were, like I said, they were all really nice, and it made it, like I said, once they got to know that I really did know what I was talking about. In every performer, you have all the great people we had there, like Jay Leno and everybody else, Shandling and all those other people. Their first look would be like, okay.
Right. Well, I think that it goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning of this interview, was that everybody has a stigma or a thought or a predetermination of what a clown is. And when you have somebody as professional as you, Jim, that not only were a professional clown on a circus level, but you were a full-time entertainer. And I think that sometimes the makeup and the costume and the big shoes throws people off. And when they realize that you're an entertainer, just like Jay Leno or Jerry Seinfeld, you're just using a different vehicle, or a magician like Amazing Jonathan or Harry Anderson, you were still doing quality magic, you were still doing some quality juggling, and you were entertaining. And that was really the whole point of having you at my club and the reason I wanted you on this podcast. So thank you so much, Jim, for all those great years of clowning, for sharing your history with us, and for my special hand-carved clown face. So I am so excited. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with Clancy the Clown, who was a mainstay mascot for my club's Laughs Unlimited back in the 80s. Jim Jays now lives in Minnesota, and it was great to be able to catch you. And I'm so happy that you went from circus clowning to being a clown at my club, and now you're still sharing your entertainment values through doing magic and comedy magic in Minnesota. Thanks for everything, and congratulations on such a long career in entertainment.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's been Jim Jays as Clancy the Clown. Stay tuned. Next week, we'll have another great show. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Scott.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC. For information on the show, merchandise, and our sponsors, or to send comments to Scott, visit our website at www.standupyourhostandmc.com. Look for more episodes soon and enjoy the world of stand-up comedy. Visit a comedy showroom near you.